Well, welcome, Erin. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed for FSS 350, our seminar course in being a food industry professional.
Perfect.
I thought we'd start with just a brief introduction, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I've been in the industry for about 7 years now. I have a master's in food science, the focus on food safety and microbiology. And I have worked in a variety of food and non-food focused jobs since starting my career about 7 years ago.
Great. This course, as I explained to you before we started the interview, is all about being a professional in the food industry, just very broadly. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit first, because students might not be familiar with the kind of work you do, what your day to day life is like.
Sure. One of the things that I loved about food science was just that there are so many different career paths that you can take. And I loved food safety because it doesn't really matter where you live or how the economy is, people are always going to need safe food. So I thought there were some really good career opportunities there. As I said, I've had kind of a few different roles in the past 7 years. I started out with a food ingredient company, working for DuPont, pretty large company. That gave me amazing opportunities to work with a variety of manufacturing food companies that everybody has heard of. So the days were very different. I would design projects to try to determine the shelf life of things or any microbial risks. I would go to processing facilities and take swabs and look around for improvements that could be easily implemented to increase the safety or the shelf life of products. Did a lot of presentations, a lot of traveling, things like that. So that job was very diverse. I learned different things every day. Um, After that, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to try my hand at sales. So I took an opportunity with a really small startup company and actually kind of did a different piece of the food industry. I did more of probiotics and supplements. So not exactly food, but very closely related. The probiotics played on the micro background that I had, and the supplement industry. People will find when you get into food, supplements, pharma, it's all so closely related, and you can really play in a lot of those fields. So I spent a little bit of time doing more of product development and sales for custom supplements. So think like probiotic gummies that you might buy at Target, that kind of thing. And then that actually led me to my current career. So I went from a company with 80,000 people to a company with about 8 people. Now I found myself at a very good happy medium. I have about 17,000 people at my current company, Charles River, and I'm back to more of my micro roots, but actually exploring a little bit of the pharma industry. So testing for toxins and sterility in products, typically something that would be injected like a vaccination or an epidural, things like that. So really, started out in food, but as I said, it's also closely related to different industries, and really you can use the skills that you learn and apply it in a lot of different ways.
You bring up so many great points in that quick summary of your last 7 years. Two things that stood out to me. One, every day can be different. There's a lot going on in the
Right,
food industry, and you really capitalized on the opportunities that were coming your way to get a lot of different experiences. Um,
right.
and also that these skills are really widely applicable because, like you said, even though maybe the average consumer doesn't think about it, the things that go on in the food industry are similar from a processing standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, to what goes on in other industries. So you never know where you might end up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so a couple of things when you talk about every day being different, um, that is so true, and that can mean whatever you want it to be. So I had friends that worked in the lab and loved being in the lab, and they loved that they were constantly learning new techniques, new opportunities, new customer challenges, all of those things. I, working at DuPont, had more of a desk job, which every day was different, but I have found over my 5 or 6 years there that I just really don't like to be at a desk every day, which is kind of what led me into sales. I've had the opportunity to work from home, to travel some, which has been really great. So there's definitely flexibility in what you want your day to look like. And that's okay. You don't have to be a person that loves the lab because someone does. And you don't have to be a person that can be productive working from home. There's different ways that you can fit in where you shine. And also when you talk about, just the different opportunities, it's so true. So I'm just kind of learning the pharma industry, but you find that the concepts are the same. The processing designs are the same. They might use different jargon, so there might be different keywords to explain the same concept, but it really is all so closely related. And, I kind of like to look at my career as like pieces of a pie chart. And to me, doing the food and then doing micro in pharma and then doing food, but kind of the formulation side, like to me, those are all just pieces of the industry pie. And I like to just add to it and, get new experiences and make myself really well-rounded.
So you hit right on one of the central themes of this course, which is to reflect on ourselves and understand what our strengths are. The students have to do self-assessments, and then they have to write reflections on their assessments. So I think you highlighted that. You really need to know what you're good at, try different things out, and see what
Right.
is going to work for you so that you can, set yourself up to be successful.
Right, absolutely. There's plenty of room for everybody to have their niche. So, it's okay if you think you really enjoy something and then when you get in there, maybe it's not what you thought. Like that's okay. Every role that I've had, even the pieces of my roles that I didn't enjoy so much, they all have come in handy, just in the learning process and career development.
Yeah. So I wanted to transition a little bit and talk sort of about career goals. And if you mentioned at the beginning that you have a master's degree in food science, but could you tell me a little bit about maybe the other degrees that your colleagues have? Because I imagine not everybody has a master's in food science. There could be a lot of different
Yeah,
backgrounds.
sure. It just really, depends on where I was. So when I was with DuPont, having a master's and not having a PhD was almost, I was certainly surrounded by PhDs. So it depends a lot on the company.
Mm.
Some companies are very determined to have a lot of specific backgrounds. So at DuPont, I was in good company. I had a lot of people that had graduate degrees, but then there were other roles like people who were working in the lab that might have just had an undergrad degree or even a master's degree. So it went all the way up. We also had people at DuPont that started out as interns after high school, and
Hmm.
they would work in our dairy processing facilities, and they knew the equipment, um, you know, as well as anybody else. So there's a lot of different opportunities depending on kind of what your background is and what your goals are.
Right.
When I was with the probiotic company, it was, very different. We had some people more in a business role. And then with my current company now, it's really great. I have an all women sales team. People come from the pharma industry. Some people are totally sales. They don't come from a food background. Like I said, their background is more a little bit in business. So you're really going to have opportunities to work with people from a variety of backgrounds. It's interesting how we have these different paths, but they can lead to the same place.
Yeah.
So there's so many different ways to do it. I do think that if you want opportunities, it's certainly beneficial to have those extra degrees, just to help get your foot in the door. But I think that once you get your foot in the door, at least my experience at DuPont was that your experience and your work ethic and things like that could end up being just as valuable as an advanced degree. But
Right.
I do think it depends on the company, and I think that you needed a lot of times to just get that interview.
So I think maybe I can summarize a little bit what you're saying, that you need to research where you want to work and understand what the culture is there so that you can make sure you're preparing yourself in the way, to get the foot in the door and to get the job that it is you want.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to look at it. We had some customers that I would present to where they would have someone else present just because I didn't have that same title as my audience. So it just really depends. I don't find that most companies are that um, judgy off of a title, but some are, and it's
Yeah.
good to be aware of that. Um, but yeah,
It's
it's for me, to be totally honest, I got a master's because I finished undergrad when in 2008 and the economy was awful. And that's what led me there. So you kind of never know um, why you do the things that you do, but it works out. It adds to your experiences.
right, right. So that's a good segue actually to one of the tougher questions I wanted to ask you. Um, you know, Everybody looks back on their careers, I think, and thinks one opportunity leads to another, and you just have to be open to taking them. But is there anything you regret not doing?
Oh, that's a good question. Honestly, no. I mean, I was very fortunate. I applied to a million things when I was finishing up graduate school. That's definitely something I recommend, is not to turn down a job that you haven't been offered.
Yeah.
So apply for a ton of stuff, even if you think you may not like it, even if you think maybe you're not qualified. You never know who the other candidates are. They may end up changing the scope of the role. And I actually ended up having a couple of different options when I finished school. And actually, the role with DuPont was not the one on paper that I thought that I wanted.
Hmm.
But then when I got there and I saw the facilities and I met the people, it was obvious that that was the better fit for me. So I really have taken some risks. I took a risk and I left a big stable company. I went to a very small startup company. It didn't end up being what I was hoping for, but I don't regret it. I think that for me, I would have regretted um, not doing what I felt was right for my career. So, like I said, if you don't like the lab, that's okay. If you don't see yourself sitting at a desk or you don't see yourself working in sales, be honest with yourself, because we're all grown-ups here and we don't all have to fit into one mold. So I would say, as someone in my 30s wanting to grow my career, I knew that I wanted to take a risk and see that growth. So even though that was not the year that I expected, I don't regret it at all. So I think I would regret not taking chances and not really putting myself out there and just being kind of stagnant.
I find that I give my students similar advice. They'll tell me I want to work in my hometown, or I don't want to consider this opportunity for whatever reason. And I like the way you phrased it. Don't say no to something you haven't been offered yet.
Right,
It doesn't hurt other than a little bit of time to prepare the application.
right.
Give it a shot, and you just don't know what door might open as a result.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So, sort of similar question, but one that I think would be nice to wrap up our interview is, what do you think you did that best prepared you to be where you are today? If you had to pick one thing, what was it?
Oh gosh, let's see. Um, wow. For me, I mean, I think it depends on the person. For me, being outgoing and making connections is something that has just always been a part of who I am. And so I think for the person, kind of again knowing what their strengths are. So for me, knowing that that was a strength of mine, I really made those connections. I made those connections back in graduate school. I still, am invited to come speak or participate in different things, which is great for my resume. At DuPont, I made connections with all of the customers of the different food companies, and that has led me to wonderful opportunities.